to today's session of EdTech Lunch and Learn. I'm your host, one of the Instructional Technology Facilitators, Cara, and I am bringing you episode 6 today on strategies to design and implement digital choice. So a couple of housekeeping things for you. We're trying to go over these at the beginning of each so everybody is on the same page. If you need to access your slideshow, remember that you can go to the short link at the top of the slideshow right here. So bit.ly/EdTech Lunch and Learn Season 1, Episode 6. So you could type that right into a new browser tab and you'll have access to this slideshow. If you are looking to receive PD credit for attending today's show, you must attend the show in its entirety. Make sure that you registered on My Learning Plan through Frontline. Make sure that you fill out the exit ticket at the end. So I'll post it at the end of the video. We'll throw the link in the chat, and we will also send out an email shortly after the show ends with the link for the exit ticket and also the slideshow. So if you don't want to follow along with the slideshow, totally fine. You can also receive it in your email at the end. You will only receive that email if you registered for PD credit. So just keep that in mind as well. Any recorded videos of past episodes are available on our channel. So feel free to head over to our channel. The links are on our Tech Facilitator webpage on the Hamilton technology page. So check that out if you need links for anything else. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, the goals of this session are a little bit more instructional. If you haven't noticed, I am a little bit more geared towards instructional uses of technology. So we're going to be talking a little bit about differentiation, how to design and implement activities that allow students choice, and especially in showing how they know what they learned or showing what they learned. I'm also going to show you some tricks on utilizing Google Classroom to create some of these different assignments, how to assign them out, and how to collect them back, and all that fun stuff. So if you have any questions at the end of this episode or during this episode, you can throw them in the chat on the side, and Chris and Joe will be available to answer them during the session. If I don't answer it, if you can't get an answer there, feel free to shoot us an email as well. So this is one of my favorite quotes, actually, and it was one of the reasons that as a social studies teacher, I really started using lots of different media in my class. So digital tools now let students create dynamic products that include a range of media, allow for differentiation, and promote curiosity and collaboration. So I'm a huge fan of differentiated instruction, and that was really how I ran my social studies class, because I had so many different students on so many different levels, including ELLs and bilingual students. So I really turned to differentiated instruction to help me get through the year, if we're being honest. So when I learned about Monica Burns and one of her books called Tasks Before Apps, it really helped me to drive the instruction, especially as a person who is a little bit obsessed with tech. If you know me, you know that. So she really wants you to focus on building a good task before you worry about what is the next shiny, cool tool that you can use online. And I know that this has been a really interesting time for all of us. And there have been a lot of companies out there that are putting out free premium trials of applications that you can use that are typically really expensive. I would warn you, when you are looking at all of those tweets and cool emails that they're sending out, be very careful that you're not getting overwhelmed with oh my God, my friend is using this and I want to use it too. You don't have to do that. Okay? I think that it's more important to design a good learning task than it is to use the latest, coolest application that's free right now for the next 90 days in your class. Because remember, once this time is over, if you really like it, you might not get the chance to use it unless you're going to pay for it. And I do not suggest doing that. It could get really overwhelming really quick. So, one of the things that Monica Burns talks about in her book, Tasks Before Apps, it's hard to say for some reason, is to make sure that you're designing rigorous learning tasks. So, again, just like we talked about the other day with HyperDocs, what are the students learning? What is the goal of the learning? How are you going to know whether they learned it or not? And what are the students going to actually accomplish by doing this task that you set forward? Make sure that you're setting your purpose. So just like we talked about with HyperDocs, a good task is focused around good teaching and good pedagogy. So please don't feel overwhelmed with all of the free stuff that's out there. Stick to what you know. Use the Google platform and build a good task before you go crazy implementing new applications and having to explain them to your kids and their parents and everything else, okay? So when you are designing activities of choice, the real basic differentiation strategies are to think about how you can offer choice either between content, process, or product. You don't need to offer all three at the same time. Typically, you're only going to pick one and then make sure it's done really well. So if you are differentiating by content, maybe the students have a choice of what types of concepts or principles they're going to learn, easier in some subject areas than others. I was a social studies teacher, so I did allow my students to have choice of content that they were going to learn, especially when I would implement choice boards that we'll talk about a little later. I would allow the students to research something possibly that they were more interested in than another topic. So I had a couple of students that were really into the medical field, and I allowed them to learn about medicine during the Civil War instead of learning about battles, because that's what they were interested in. And I thought that was more important for them than to know a bunch of dates. So again, personal preference, decide what you think is important. Another great way to design choice is to give a choice in the process. So how the student is going to make sense of the content. Maybe sketchnoting is better for them, and they like to draw and doodle, and they feel that drawing on their notebook while they listen to your video is going to be more meaningful for them than just taking a Google form quiz at the end of the screencast that you did. So thinking about the process of how the students are going to make sense of that content is also a good place to implement choice. Product is probably the easiest place to allow students to make choice. So what kind of product are they going to create to show that they learned something? So it can be digital, it can be hands-on, it can be on paper. It doesn't really matter. You're giving them the choice to make that decision. So that's very powerful. So some popular choice structures, if you're not familiar with them, I know that in the future, the digital assessment guidelines and professional workshops that are going to be offered, they're going to go into more depth with some of these, and they're going to continue to talking about this. So if this is of interest to you for alternative assessment, those PDs are going to be really, really worthwhile for you. So some of the popular choice structures that are included that I've used are choice boards, learning menus, playlists, hyperdocs, and multimedia text sets. So I'm not really going to get a chance to talk about all of these things today because they're very involved in design. But I think one of the benefits of designing all of this stuff ahead of time, even though it feels like as a teacher you're spending so much time planning instead of implementing, it really does free up your time while the students are working. So even if it takes you a full 3 or 4 days to plan this, if your kids are working on that activity for the next 2 weeks, that really frees you up to just assist while they're doing it. And that's true digitally in remote learning situation and also in the classroom. So one of the huge benefits I saw as a teacher was that even though I spent a lot of time designing, I could always go back the next year to make it better and change up the applications or use the student feedback I got to make the choices, options better. And furthermore, while the kids were working on a 3 to 5 day, maybe even longer than that, activity, I was really there to be able to go around and help the students while they were working. And everybody was making their own choices. So it changes the conversation in the classroom when the student is not doing their assignment, or I guess remotely too. It's really not about their behavior. It becomes a conversation about, if you chose to do that project and you don't want to do it, then why did you choose it? So is there something else that you think would better suit your needs or that you're more interested in doing? Or what is it that's holding you back? So the conversation doesn't focus around managing behavior. It's more about what that kid is choosing to do at that time. So they don't feel as attacked in not doing their work. They don't take it as personally. And that's just coming from my personal experience in the classroom. So you might have a different experience with that, but I just wanted to throw that in there. Anyway, popular choice structures. So hyperdocs, also we went over in depth the other day with my hyperdoc class. So if you are interested in learning more about hyperdocs and you missed that, you can go back to our YouTube channel and view it there. So let me show you a couple examples of choice boards, also known as tic-tac-toe boards, depending on how you design them. Depends on, what exactly you want the students to do. So this one is one that I've used in my class as a social studies teacher. So I'll show you a little bit about that in a sec. And this one came from one of my innovator friends, Google innovator friends, Jolie. So I've linked that here too, and I'll show you a little bit about this. So she has a reading response choice board, which is really, really simple. So you could use this for any time that a student has to create a response. So maybe in addition to doing their traditional 3 comprehension questions, you can also allow them to choose 1 or 2 or 3 of these activities, depending on the length and importance of the reading that they did, to kind of show what they learned. So they have to start in the middle with reading a story, complete 3 of the activities, and turn in all of their work on Google Classroom. So the directions are very clear what the student has to do. She's got options here for audio learners. So Vocaroo is a quick little audio tool, Powtoon, a timeline creator in Google Drawings, an iMovie, a read and write activity, a Google Form, a Google Sheet, and a Google Slideshow. So a couple of things to note here. Typically with a choice board, everybody does the thing in the middle. And then depending on your directions, whether it's a tic-tac-toe, so you need to get 3 in a row, or the students could just pick 2 or 3 activities anywhere on the board. Typically the center box is something that everybody will do, and then you can go from there. When you build the boxes out on the other sides of the center, you typically try to hit on different learning modalities or different apps and what they are getting at, okay? So you have a simple form here that is probably just about comprehension, so different level of Bloom's taxonomy than maybe creating a video or a book trailer. Okay, so maybe a student that's not comfortable with the content is going to choose an easier activity to do. So that might tell you something about how the student feels about that content too. A Google Sheet for those analytical people out there, I am not one of them. I had to call Jim, my boss, the other day to have him help me with a Google Sheet because I was driving myself crazy. So Google Sheets, analytical people, not for everyone. But again, meeting the needs of your students, knowing your students, and being able to provide them with an option to do that. Google Slideshow, very common way to demonstrate understanding, and things like that. Google Drawings. So you can always, link to things within your choice board. And just like a hyperdoc, the benefit of the choice board is that everything is in one place. It's a one-stop shop for the student to go and get all of the information that they need for their project. So I will quickly show you the Causes of the Revolution choice board. Again, this is something that I used in my class and worked on for, I can't even tell you how many years it took to get to this place. So I was always switching out activities based on student feedback that I got, what they liked, what they seemed to be constantly doing instead. So I would kind of change it up based on that. So I would have them create a video playlist on YouTube for review of the events before the test, and then use a Google Doc to explain why they chose each of the videos. The kids really got a kick out of searching YouTube for videos, and they were watching American Revolution videos, so I couldn't really be upset about that. I had them listen to some things from the Broadway show Hamilton, and then write their own poem or rap song to lead up to it and post it on the classroom Padlet. The Padlet I used as like a digital bulletin board. So the kids could post images or links to their projects that they created, and they could go and see everybody else's projects at the end of the submission period. So I didn't let them see each other's projects while the submission period was going on, only at the end. It's also a great link to share with your administrator and say, hey, this is my digital bulletin board. This is where I put the student work while they were working from home. So if you want to investigate Padlet, really cool app, definitely check it out. For my theater people, I had them write a scene for a play on the Boston Tea Party. So that was really fun. A couple of years I had kids that actually acted it out. So they worked as a small group. They collaboratively wrote this scene, and then they acted it out in the front of the class. It was awesome. I recorded one and I still have it. It's fantastic. I love going back and being able to see that. Another fun one, build a scene or a monument to represent a person or event leading up to the war. Use Legos. So I did have an actual box of Legos in class where the kids could go and they would build battles out of Legos, and then they had to either take photos of them with their phone and upload them to a slideshow, and then they would explain what they made and what everything represented. So it went beyond just building stuff with Legos, right? So somebody might come in and be like, oh my God, Miss Floodman, the crazy lady, is letting her 8th graders are building stuff out of Legos. Like, what is going on? But then if they saw what they were actually doing, or if anybody asked the kid, hey, what project are you working on? They would be able to tell them that. So it was very clear. And for those kids that needed to be constantly moving and maybe wanted to get off of a computer for a little while, it gave them a chance to kind of step back. 2 sequential journal entries. Again, in the center, there's a star. This was the thing that everybody had to do. And there's, a political ad, an Instagram page, an easy one for kids who don't have access to a computer. They could do this, on paper. Had a template so they could take printouts, while we were in school to be able to do that, or create a comic strip. So really common things, nothing crazy. At the end, with the Padlet, I also talked about giving constructive feedback and positive feedback to your friends. They could use these sentence starters to give feedback to each other. They had their links to everything. I created screencasts to tell them how to use different applications if they didn't know how to do it. and things like that. So I tried to make it a one-stop shop for them to get all of the information on how to do things. All right, so those are just some examples of how you can create a choice board. It can be really, really in-depth, like the Causes of the Revolution choice board, or it could be pretty straightforward and used for something more simple, like a response, a reading response. Choice boards, learning menus, and any other differentiated activities like that are also great for kids who are done with nothing else to do. So they can choose from the list what is it that they want to do when they're finished and go and investigate something more. So when you're creating your choice board, you need to include lots of different product ideas. So if you're having trouble figuring out how you can help or how you can change what you're doing, this is just a list that I put together of all different kinds of products that you can have your students make. So again, you can pop this short link into your browser and come back to this list again and again. It's a really great way to just kind of remove yourself from what you as the teacher like doing and giving options for the students of what they like doing. So keep that in the back of your mind too. So a lot of these things do include utilizing applications on the web. I am not the FERPA police, but if you haven't heard of FERPA, FERPA and COPA are both the federal privacy laws for students and schools to follow when signing up for apps online. It is so, so, so important in this day and age that we keep in mind where our students are putting their personal identifiable information out on the web. If you do not know if an application that you are using or website is FERPA compliant, you can reach out to the tech facilitators, and if we don't know, we will research it for you. Be very careful. All I can say is err on the side of caution. If you don't know, don't use it at all, okay? It's really, really important that our students' privacy is protected for their future, because a lot of us, when we were growing up, did not face anything like this. We weren't putting our information out on the web. It's more likely that tools not be used by students that are under the age of 13. So if you're working with kids that are less than 13 years old, this will apply to you more than students that are over the age of 13. So there's a little bit more freedom with kids who are over 13, though there are a lot of websites that request you get parent, what's the word I'm looking for? Validation or permission, holy moly, parent permission before they go on that application. So this only applies to websites where your student is logging in. If they're logging in, that's when you need to be worried. If they're just going to research something on the web, that doesn't count. So you're only looking where they have to actually put their information in to become a user of that site with a username and password. Anything that we, the facilitators, put out is safe. So always check the remote learning resources page first. If you're looking for a new idea, start with those apps. There's plenty that you can do with Google. So always start there. Okay. If you want to go outside that realm, either reach out or you can read the privacy policy. You can go to this website, the FERPA guidelines, and read them yourself. And the privacy policy is a whole bunch of legalese that will make you go cross-eyed when you're trying to read it. And you can also, like I said, email us. You can also email the company. Sometimes they'll get back to you if you just reach out to them and say, hey, are you FERPA compliant? My students are 9. What do you think? Okay. So when you're choosing your tools, number one, make sure they're FERPA compliant or COPA compliant or both. Another note on that, you can go to Common Sense Education. They have a privacy listing on there that will tell you what they think about a whole bunch of different websites. So side note, can the tool actually help students create a final product that is shareable with an authentic audience? Is the interface user-friendly, or is it going to require lessons to teach the kids how to use the tool? So if you can't figure it out, the kids might not be able to figure out. And if you want to let the students use it, you kind of have to know a little bit about it. Don't just give them stuff and say, "Oh, this is a great website. If you can figure out how to use it, go for it." You can do that depending on your students, but I would really, really caution you against doing that. So, some recommended tools for when you are offering digital choice. This is Adobe Spark EDU. If you haven't heard from it, the EDU version is FERPA compliant, so make sure you are using the Adobe Spark EDU. There's lots of graphics that you can create with this website. Adobe Spark EDU is also has like templates. So I'm not really an artistic person. I try to rely on graphic design or templates or things that are already created to help me when I make stuff. But Adobe Spark does have a lot of templates on it that students can use to kind of design. A lot of times, if you're designing things really simple, even like Google Forms headers, you have to know the pixel size of everything. So those templates are already set up in Adobe Spark. So those are really helpful. Again, Google. If you stick to Google, you'll be doing great. If you don't know, on our Tackling Technology website, it's not called that, but on the Tech Facilitator website, there are links to our YouTube channel where, along with the recordings of these professional learning experiences, you also have links to any video that we've created previously. So, for example, Google Drawings is a lesser known app that is awesome. You can do so many things with Google Drawings. Check out the video there if you're looking for something new to do. Another thing is a lot of these EdTech bloggers like Matt Miller, he's got hundreds of Google Drawings templates on his website. So you don't have to create everything from scratch. Like, use all these people that are putting their ideas out there on the web to go and take a template from them and modify it or use it with your students. Book Creator is another great one. EDU, there's a couple teachers around the district who I've talked about with Book Creator, and they really like it, so give it a shot. Padlet, talked about that a little bit earlier. Flipgrid, probably one of my top faves. Flipgrid has a cool thing on their website called the Disco Library. So you can always, it's a discovery library, and if you go there, it'll give you all different kinds of ways to use Flipgrid. And I included Flipgrid, even though we were kind of talking about ways to organize digital choice. Flipgrid, their tagline or their motto is student voice. So I feel that when you're giving a student a choice on the type of learning they are demonstrating, it's also a way for them to use their voice in their learning. So they're saying, this is what I think is important. This is how I want to demonstrate my learning. So it's giving them ownership. It's giving student voice. And that's why I included Flipgrid. A couple others, LucidPress, a cool one. You can use that LucidPress education version. You can use that to design magazine articles, newspaper articles, can save to Google Drive, can push out with a link, all really cool things. Buncee for EDU, if you're working in the K-5 level, Buncee is really popular for them. Again, sort of like an easier version of Adobe Spark. Great way to allow students to design products. Screencastify, Joe did a whole episode on Screencastify earlier, so definitely check out Screencastify if you haven't already. All right. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is obviously implementing your digital choice boards. So this is kind of where we switch gears a little bit to the teacher side of things too. And if you haven't already noticed, since we've been doing online learning, not all digital natives have digital readiness. So since we've been doing online learning, remote learning, you've probably noticed that just because the kids use their phones and their Chromebooks and computers all the time does not mean that they actually know anything about using a computer. So you may or may not have noticed this. Some kids are really, really far in the computer world, like coding stuff, 3D printing stuff, and doing really awesome things like that. Some kids are not. So when you are planning these activities that you want your students to do, you have to keep that in mind. Just don't assume, just like adults, not everybody has the amount of readiness or capabilities to use a computer that we think they do. Just because they grew up with it doesn't mean they actually understand it, and their access at home might be different. They might be sharing devices or sharing their computers with their parents who have to also work. So just keep that in mind. And I just really like this quote. I don't even know where I saw it originally, but it's just something that I always try to keep in the back of my mind when working with kids. So just like you would provide scaffolding for students to understand content, you can also provide scaffolding for students to utilize technology, okay? So I organized this list in terms of least amount of teacher prep to probably some of the most amount of teacher prep, and this was really organized for in the classroom, but they all really still apply remotely. So you can have a tech expert. Maybe one of the students in your class knows 10 times more technology than you do. So you say, hey, if everybody has a problem, Joe has volunteered to answer some of your questions between the hours of 2 and 3 p.m. So if you have any questions, post on the stream in Google Classroom and Joe can answer your question. Okay, so you can still do that remotely, though you can also do it in real life. That's what IRL is, in real life. Checklists. Checklists are awesome for special ed needs and for any student. I make checklists for myself. If you saw my desk here, even at home, the first thing I did was went and got a stack of Post-its as soon as I knew I was working from home, because that's how I organize myself in the office. I just have Post-its everywhere. So I ball them up when I'm all done and I throw them away, and it's very makes me feel like I accomplished something. So checklists, Post-it notes, they're really helpful to help keep students on track. You can make them in Google Docs. You can make them in Google Keep. They're really, really helpful for helping keep you and the students on track. Graphic organizers, super helpful to help students plan out their work. Again, if you're designing digital choice, you can make them optional. You do not have to make checklists and graphic organizers part of the student's grade. You can say, here, I have this graphic organizer. If you want to use it, you can. And then it also becomes a really good conversation with the student. Hey, did you check out that graphic organizer that I had? Did you use it? Oh, you didn't? Oh, maybe check that out. It might help you organize your thoughts a little bit better. So again, you're providing the student with a way to take ownership of their own learning and go and do it and make the decision for themselves that they need the graphic organizer instead of just requiring it. Okay, station rotation, a lot of elementary teachers, you guys are super familiar with this, totally possible in middle school and high school, though you just have to kind of rethink it. Yes, I did do stations in my 8th grade class, so it gives the teacher a chance to work with the students. You could totally do this remotely. So if you schedule maybe a Zoom meeting with your reading group and you have a smaller group meeting or Google Hangouts, whatever you want to use, a super way to intervene and see what the kids are up to in a smaller group instead of trying to meet with all 30 kids at the same time. Great way to have students work collaboratively from a distance as well. And the last one is screencasts, which we heard about earlier this week. So they're videos that can explain tasks to students. What you can do is if you're introducing a new application that students might not know how to use, you can create a quick video on it. You could also, like I said with the HyperDoc, create a quick video to explain what the HyperDoc is and how the students have to use it throughout. So it's almost like a mini lesson or an introduction to the project, just like you would do in the classroom. So it gives students ownership to pursue understanding on their own, and there's a lot of self-guided autonomy. So again, you can provide the screencast, but it doesn't have to be mandatory. Like, I'm going to give you 5 points for watching the screencast. Okay, who cares? Just let the kids watch it if they think they need it. Okay, so making it optional, that's what starts to give them ownership of completing tasks. All right, and I know you will hear more about alternative assessment grading and such in the workshops that are going to take place next week or after spring break. Rubrics really helped me keep everything organized. It helped me before the task to identify what I actually wanted the students to create. And that way I can kind of look at all of my choices. So I personally would create one rubric that would apply to all of the activities, okay? Not an easy task, but once you kind of get it going, you can do it. It can be done. So you have to really, really think about what you're looking for and how to generalize those concepts. So lots of rubrics. You can actually build a rubric on Google Classroom as well. Not great, but you could do it. Okay, so rubrics, super important in setting your expectations, identifying learning goals, and figuring out where the students might have a problem going forward. Just a video, not going to show this video to you, but if you haven't ever watched the TED Talk from Sir Ken Robinson, Do Schools Kill Creativity? It's from 2006, which is pretty insane. But it's a great watch. So if you're really interested in differentiated instruction or digital choice or just choice in general in the classroom, he really goes off on the deep end of explaining it, and it's really, really awesome. If you've never watched it, highly recommend. So TED Talks. All right, so I want to kind of change gears again and talk about implementing it with Google Classroom. I talked a little bit about the rubric creation, but when you are implementing this in Classroom, there are a couple of ways you can do this. So I'm just going to show you a screenshot of an assignment creation here and talk about all the different things you can do in this one little section. So when you're creating an assignment in Google Classroom, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So it allows you to differentiate, it allows you to add resources, and then you can decide how you want your students to submit their project or activity when they're done. So when you are doing your Google Classroom, you can put in a title. If you're not already, I do suggest coming up with a naming convention for your Google Classroom so that the students can easily follow the, what do you call it? It's like series of events that's going on, and adding a topic is really helpful as well. So in our online class, anybody who's taken it, we use the naming convention hashtag 001. It makes the information searchable on the page, and it's also very, very, very organized, and you don't have to remember like the 10 words that you named your assignment. You just call it by a number, and that's it. Did you do number 7? And then the conversation becomes a lot shorter than you trying to remember what you called the assignment. Add as many instructions as you can. Be super, super specific. Oops, hang on. There you go. Okay. And then the first thing that most people know you can do is add something from your Google Drive. So you click the paperclip, and then it gives you an option to add from Drive. So you can add there. You select which activity you are adding in. And then you also have, once you add it, from Google Drive, it appears down here right below. You can add multiple things. It doesn't just have to be one thing. I'm not sure if there's a limit on the amount of things you can add, but I'm sure there is. I can't imagine how many things it would be. You also have the create button. So what you can do is if you're giving students choice, okay, so say this is the choice board here that we've attached. You can give students the ability to just view the file. So if they don't need to actually do anything with it, they can just view the file. And what they can do after they've created something, they can click create right here and then start their slideshow or doc or drawing or whatever right from that create button. If you want students to edit the file, just be warned that if you select edit file, that means every student is collaborating on the same document that you've attached. Okay, so they're not editing their own version, just a collaborative one in the class. You can also make a copy for each student. So what this does is send an actual file to each student's Google Drive so they have a copy now and they're not messing with your original. They're just typing or working on the one you sent. Okay. Just a word of advice. I did hear earlier in the week that some people were having some glitches going on with this. It is a known issue with Google right now, so I'm sure they're working on it, trying to get it resolved. If you do see that happen where you send it out and only 20 of your kids got the copy but 10 didn't, keep trying to refresh your page. Maybe go into the student who didn't receive it and open that student, like click on their name and just send them a comment or something like that and see if that helps. But that is a known issue. So just know that if you do see that glitch anywhere, they're working on it and it should be resolved soon. Another thing you can do to differentiate is if you see here when you go to actually assign your activity, you can select which class you want it to go, but you can also hit this little drop down arrow and assign which students will see it. So maybe you're working with an in-class support teacher and they're going to take your choice board and modify it for their students. So they can make their own post and just select their students and send it out to just them. And the students in your class will never know who got what activity because they shouldn't be sharing with each other what they're getting. So that's a great way to differentiate also. And finally, you have the Add Rubric button. So this is a very, very, very new feature. You can go and check it out if you are willing or interested or curious. Click on the plus sign on the rubric and you'll be able to create a very small basic rubric. If you're doing something super, super in-depth like a choice board, like one of the ones I showed you earlier, you probably don't want to go this route. You can always attach your rubric here as a file instead. I would suggest maybe doing that and testing out the waters with the rubric creator just to see how it goes. Love to give you guys resources. So here are some of my favorites. Casey Bell from Shake Up Learning. She literally just came out with this article this week about choice boards during school closures. So check out that link if you want to read about how she suggests using. She's also got a whole bunch of templates on this website, so you can download blank choice board designs or see a bunch. I know that there's one on there about conjugating Spanish verbs, which was super interesting. So you could check that out. And there's also one about figurative language for ELA. So definitely check those out. Again, you can totally take those, steal them, remix them, and use them for yourself. TCEA is a technology organization out of Texas. They wrote an article about choice boards, and they actually highlight a tech coach from South Jersey and how she talks about choice boards. So check that out if you're interested. Here's an article about using Book Creator in the high school. This is a link to a Google Drive that has all the examples that I used in my classroom. Again, with the hyperdocs, this is the Give Teachers website, and the ISTE standards, link to the ISTE standards. So ISTE is the International Society for Technology Educators. They have standards for students, teachers, coaches, and school leaders. So if you're not familiar with those standards, you might want to give them a check for students and just out of curiosity, see, what is it that they expect students to be able to do by the time they're in 12th grade as far as technology goes. The teacher standards are really interesting too, if you're kind of reflecting on the technology skills that you have or would like to grow in. So definitely check those out. And again, if you want to learn more on Twitter, you can check out Dr. Monica Burns at Class Tech Tips, Casey Bell, and Flipgrid. Flipgrid has like the most active Twitter page that ever lived. So if you tag them, they will like your tweet. It's actually kind of fun. So definitely check out Flipgrid on Twitter or the hashtag Student Voice if you are looking for some new ideas on how to incorporate digital choice in your classroom or your digital classroom, remote learning classroom. I don't even know what to call it anymore. So I hope you guys enjoyed that session. If you need to contact us for any reason, here's all of our contact information, email, Google Hangout. We have one episode tomorrow on Zoom that a lot of people are excited about. So hope everything is going well and that you guys are all well. And we will see you soon. Thanks so much for attending. All right, here's the moment you've all been waiting for. It is the exit ticket. So remember, in order to get credit for today's session, you need to fill out this exit ticket. So it's opening in a new tab in your browser. Type in the URL bar where you put the website address, bit.ly/capital letter LLLEXIT. Again, we will email this to you if you cannot type it in that quickly. Have no fear, the email will arrive in just